please say your name and spell your name?
Katherine Magbanua, Katherine Magbanua.
I see that you're in jail clothes. Are you currently in custody?
Yes, ma'am.
What are you in custody for?
The murder?
Are you doing a sentence for murder?
Yes, ma'am.
You were convicted of murder?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that the murder of Dan Markell?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have a trial in your case?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you testify?
Yes, ma'am.
You testified on your own behalf?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And when you testified, were you truthful with the jury?
No, ma'am. I was not.
Did you take the same oath that you just took today in your own trial?
Yes, ma'am.
What was your defense when you were tried?
That I had nothing to do with it.
All right. That we got it right in reference to Charlie Adelson and we got it right in reference to the killers,
Yes,
but you
ma'am.
weren't in the middle.
Yes, ma'am.
Was that true?
No, ma'am, it was not.
Were you in the middle?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And didn't you also testify in the trial in which Sigfredo Garcia was convicted of murder?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And what was his defense?
That he had nothing to do with it.
That we got it right in reference to Charlie Adelson and we got it right in reference to the killers, but he had nothing to do with it,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Objection, Your Honor, B.
Overruled, Ms. Calvin, make sure you use any questions.
And was that defense truthful?
No, ma'am, it was not.
So Sigfredo Garcia was involved.
Yes, ma'am, he was.
So why tell the truth now?
I believe that the truth needed to come out now so that the family can get some type of closure.
Why didn't the truth need to come out last year or the year before or the year before that?
I was trying to defend myself.
You were trying to get off.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you think you'd be successful in your trial with that defense?
I thought so.
Has anyone promised you anything for your testimony here today?
No, ma'am.
Weren't you originally offered immunity for cooperation in this case?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
But you didn't take us up on that
No, ma'am, I didn't.
because you thought you could get off completely.
Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
And now you're doing a life sentence.
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Did Charlie Adelson threaten to harm you if you told the truth?
No, ma'am, he didn't threaten me.
Did anybody threaten you to keep your silence?
No, ma'am.
Did anybody promise you anything if you remained silent all these years?
I wasn't promised anything, but I wasn't promised anything.
Go ahead, finish your thought. You weren't promised anything, but what?
I thought everything was going to be okay.
You thought you'd be acquitted.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so did you know Dan Markell?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you have any personal beef with him?
No, ma'am, I did not.
What was your motivation for becoming a part of this murder plot?
Financially.
So not as a favor to Charlie Adelson?
Objection, Your Honor.
What is the objection?
Leading.
I'll rephrase it, Your
Sorry.
Honor. Was it a favor to Charlie Adelson?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Okay, but your primary motivation was not favor to Charlie Adelson?
Well, yes, ma'am, it was. And financially.
All right, because you were going to get paid for
Yes.
your part?
Yes,
How much
ma'am.
did you get paid?
I don't know the exact amount.
What was your relationship to Charlie Adelson?
He was my ex-boyfriend.
When did you meet him?
I believe that was in 2013.
Do you know what month?
Has to be around September.
Can you point him out and describe what he's wearing?
He's sitting over there with a blue jacket and a blue tie.
Let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant.
The record will reflect.
Show you what are marked as states 48. Making recognize this exhibit?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
How do you recognize it?
That's when we went to Key West.
Is that a fair and accurate photo of you and Charlie Adelson?
Yes, ma'am, it
Is
is.
that when the two of you were taken, when the two of you were dating?
Yes, ma'am.
Judge, at this time, I'd ask to move into evidence states 48.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
48 is admitted.
Do we have that for publication? So was this photo taken before or after the murder?
Before.
Who came up with the idea to kill Dan Markel?
Charlie.
So Sigfredo Garcia didn't come up with the idea?
No, ma'am, he did not.
Luis Rivera didn't come up with the idea?
No, ma'am, he did not.
When did the defendant first bring this idea up to you?
My first recollection was around Halloween of 2013.
Around Halloween or on the actual?
On Halloween, yes, ma'am.
All right. What's your recollection of how that came up?
We were at a Halloween party in Lincoln Road, and right before we were about to go, he got in the car with me and he asked me a question.
What was the question?
Do you know anybody that can harm someone?
And did you know anybody that could harm someone?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Who was that?
Sigfredo.
And at the time, what was your relationship with Sigfredo?
Wasn't the best.
But he was the father of your children, right?
Yes, ma'am, he is.
So were you dating both men at this time, or were you only dating Charlie?
No, I was only dating Charlie.
Okay. And so he meaning the defendant, initially said, do you know anyone that could harm someone? Was he aware of your connection to Sigfredo Garcia when he made that statement?
Not that I know of. No, ma'am.
Did you suggest Sigfredo Garcia at that time to the defendant?
No, ma'am.
What did you say?
I just said yes and kind of left it alone.
All right. Did it go any further than that at that time?
Not that night. I don't
Did
believe
you
so.
know who he wanted harmed
Did
at that time?
no, ma'am.
All right. Had you become aware during the course of your relationship with him that he had some kind of issue going on with his sister's ex-husband?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
What did you learn about that?
He was just stating that his family wasn't, his mom and dad was stressed, and that his sister was having problems with her husband and custody of her 2 children.
And when did you learn that the person that the defendant wanted harmed was this ex-husband of the sister?
I believe later on.
All right. And when did you learn the name Dan Markel?
It wasn't until, I don't know if it was on my trial or when Sigfredo got arrested.
Okay, so even when he was killed, you didn't know the name of the person that was being killed.
Yes, I never knew his name.
How did the defendant refer to this person, if not by the name Dan or Danny Markel?
Wendy's husband.
Okay. So you knew that the person that was going to be initially harmed was Wendy's husband?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you knew that there were issues, or what did you know about the beef with him?
He painted this picture that this was a terrible man and making his family go through a lot custody-wise with his sister.
All right, and when he would say these things to you, is it in the context of his mom specifically or his family in general?
I believe it was more towards his mom.
Meaning what?
That his mom hasn't been sleeping, his mom is not eating. I know his dad wasn't the best health either, but he would refer to his mom a lot.
All right. And the reason she wasn't sleeping or eating, did that have to do with this ex-husband of Wendy?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever tell the defendant who it was that was going to be doing the job?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Why didn't you say the name Sigfredo to Charlie Adelson?
I always referred to each other as my friend. Neither one of them wanted to really hear each other's names.
And why is that?
Because Sigfredo was the father of my kids, and I was dating him at that time. I was dating Charlie at that time.
Okay, so Sigfredo Garcia, did he have strong feelings about the defendant?
Yes, he didn't like him.
All right, and is that because you were dating him?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And vice versa, you're not going to talk about the child's father with the new boyfriend either?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So is it true then that you were sort of walling these two off from each other before the issue of the murder and the conspiracy ever even arose?
Yes, ma'am.
And did that pattern continue throughout the murder conspiracy?
Yes, ma'am, it did.
Do you think Charlie Adelson knew that it was your child's father that you were going to?
He might have had an idea, but he just never said it out loud.
There's one phone call between, I think it's from Sigfredo Garcia to Harvey Adelson, the father of the defendant. Do you know anything about that phone call? That was on July 1st of 2014.
Yes, ma'am.
What do you know about that phone call?
From the trial, what I remember was that Sigfredo had contacted or was trying to contact Charlie, but we were in a heated argument at that time. We were kind of in the middle of the street, and I guess it's the first thing he looked up was his work number.
All right, so you say you're in a heated argument. Is this the confrontation that occurred while you and the defendant were going jet skiing?
I believe that was after.
It was after that incident?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, how many interactions personally, face to face, did, to your knowledge, Charlie Adelson have with Sigfredo Garcia?
That was probably the only one that I remember was that jet ski accident.
Accident?
Or like the confrontation.
All right, tell us what happened at that confrontation.
Sigfredo had just picked up the kids, and he was eating at a corner pizza place with the kids, and he saw that Charlie was coming by to go pick me up, and I guess saw the jet skis in the back of the car. So he loaded up the kids and cut us off, was screaming a couple things out loud, but we didn't really hear anything because our windows was up.
All right, did you say he cut you off? Do you mean in traffic?
In the back street of where I lived at that time.
All right, and when you say he cut you off, did he run you off the road or something else?
He kind of just went right and blocked the road in front of us, so Charlie had to kind of do a 3-point turn and go around the other way.
Did the two men actually get out into the street and confront each other?
No, ma'am, they did not.
Okay, were any actual words exchanged through the windows?
Through the windows, yes, but I had my window up, so we didn't know what Sigfredo was saying.
All right, so Sigfredo shouted some things out the window. Did Mr. Adelson do the same?
No, he did not.
And what were the things that were shouted out the window? Were you able to hear them or not?
I didn't hear anything.
All right. And at this point, this is July 1st of 2014, the plot is already underway to do this murder, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Does Sigfredo Garcia know that he's doing the murder for Charlie Adelson?
To my knowledge, he might have had an inkling about it, but I don't know. That was never spoken of.
Okay, the killers, and when I say the killers, I'm referring to Garcia and Rivera, knew they were doing something for a lady to get her kids back. Do you know how they knew that information?
I believe it's because of the envelope that Charlie gave me to pass over.
Okay, so you didn't relay that information to them that it had to do with a lady and her kids?
I might have mentioned it to Sigfredo, yes.
Okay, so if you mentioned that to Sigfredo, would you be, I guess, were you intentionally trying to characterize this job as being related to someone other than Charlie Adelson?
I believe so, yes.
Because Sigfredo Garcia would not have wanted to do anything to help out Charlie Adelson?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So, do you think Sigfredo knew that this lady with the kids was somehow connected to Charlie Adelson?
I believe so.
All right. And there was going to be a lot of money paid for this job, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you know anybody else with that kind of money or that might have had that kind of money to get this job for them?
No, ma'am, I did not.
All right, you mentioned the paper. Luis Rivera said there was a paper that Sigfredo had when they came to do the murder. Do you know anything about that paper?
No, ma'am, I don't.
All right. Did you provide a paper to Sigfredo Garcia?
Yes, I did.
All right, and when you say you don't know anything about it, but you gave it to him, you obviously know something about it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so tell us I know what you're trying to say is you don't know what was on the paper.
The content of it, yes.
Tell us how you got the
One
paper.
moment. Mr. Rochford. Ms. Kappelman, please use open-ended questions.
Tell us how you came into possession of this paper that the killers had.
Okay. One day, just a random night that I was over at Charlie's house, he had a manila envelope that was sealed. He told me, Katie, do not open it. Do not touch it. Do not look inside it. I didn't print this paper out from my office, printed it probably from another office, and basically give that paper to the other person.
All right, and who is saying this?
This was Charlie.
All right, this defendant.
Yes, ma'am.
So he says to you, I have this paper. How does he give it to you?
I had a diaper bag, so he showed me the envelope, and I was like, just put it in there.
Did he express any concerns about fingerprints being on the envelope or the contents?
Yes, ma'am. He said he wore a glove so that there's no fingerprints on it. He was very specific about me not opening it and not looking inside it. And he also told me that he didn't print it from his office.
All right, and what about licking the envelope?
And that he didn't lick the envelope.
He said he did not lick the envelope?
He did not lick the
And what was the
envelope.
purpose of that?
I guess his DNA.
Okay. So did you touch the envelope?
It was in my diaper bag, but I don't remember if I never opened it, but I might have touched it just to stick it inside in my diaper bag.
And did you deliver the envelope to Sigfredo Garcia?
I must have contacted Sigfredo and just told him, hey, come by the house. And then, he was kind of in and out of my life, so he'd pop up. He literally got the envelope. I was like, you have something inside that bag. And then he grabbed it, stuffed it in his pants, and left.
Okay. In regards to the June trip that the killers made, did you provide Garcia or Rivera with any money for expenses
Yes, ma'am.
associated with that trip?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And where did you get the money from to do that?
From Charlie Adelson.
Can you tell us about that? What was the context of you getting that money?
Sigfredo would just ask me, hey, I'm going to need some money. I need to go out of town. And I'm like, okay. So then I'd go to Charlie, or I'd be at Charlie's house, and I'll tell him I need some money for the expenses.
And he gave you some money?
Yes, ma'am.
About how much money, if you know?
I can't recall, but it was a couple $100.
So this thing started back in October of 13 and doesn't get done until July of 14. Can you describe whether there's any pressure as time is going on and this thing is not getting done?
Trying to remember, like, in the beginning of the year, I don't think there was really much. I mean, he's been planting this seed in my head that this needed to get done. And I guess towards probably around June, July is when he was a little bit more adamant about this job getting done.
Okay, and when you say he, you're talking about who?
Charlie.
Did you ever have any contact with any other Adelson about this job?
No, ma'am.
In the context of, you know, this needs to get done, this pressure getting put on you, is there ever a mention of the mom, Donna, or the divorce situation in the context of getting it done?
At that time, not that I could recall.
Will you publish 35, please? Is this you on the left side of the screen?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Right. And was this picture, where was this picture taken?
This was in South Beach. I believe the building that they were living at where Charlie's parents were living at.
Is that the icon?
I don't think that was the icon. It was somewhere in First and Ocean.
Okay, so a different residence.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and this photo, was this the first time you'd ever met Wendy, or had you already known Wendy before this photo?
I met her one time prior to this because I believe this was in Father's Day. So I met her around spring break when I had dinner with her and Jeffrey.
Okay, so the Yardbird restaurant?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so this was the second time you'd met her.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have a relationship with her outside of her being Charlie's sister?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you communicate with her by phone or through any apps or anything like that?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you receive any communication from her specifically about the homicide?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did Wendy ever give you any money or other gifts?
No, ma'am, she did not.
Did anybody pay you for your part in the murder other than Charlie Adelson?
No, ma'am, they did not.
All right, and the payments from Charlie Adelson, did those include the checks that were signed by his mother from
Yes,
the Adelson
ma'am.
Institute?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Did you perform any job at the Adelson Institute?
No, ma'am, I did not.
You didn't go up there and clean on the weekends?
No, ma'am, I did not.
On the night of the murder, did you go to the defendant's house?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And where was that house, or what house was that?
That was in Whale Harbor in Fort Lauderdale.
All right, and did you get payment for the murder that night?
I believe it was the following morning.
Were you in a panic when you arrived at his house?
Was I in a panic?
In a panic.
I wasn't in a panic, but Charlie was.
Okay, explain that. How was he acting?
When I opened the door, he was kind of frantic, and he had a gun in his hand, and he was just all over the place.
Was that normal behavior for him?
Not having a gun in his hand, no, ma'am.
All right, did you know him to have a gun prior to that?
Yes, ma'am. He has a gun safe.
All right, but he just didn't usually carry around in his hand?
Yeah, he's never had it in his hand.
Turn the phone off, please.
What was he saying to you when he was in this frantic state?
I can't really recall because he had given me some Xanax, so it was a little blurry that night, and I just fell asleep. I think we both fell asleep. So.
All right. Can you tell the jury whether the excitement that he was showing had to do with the murder or something else?
Yes, ma'am. It had to do with that.
Okay. Was anybody else there at his residence when you arrived?
At that day, no, ma'am.
Okay. Did you ever see his parents at the residence?
No, I didn't see his parents.
Okay. How was the money packaged when you got it? I think you said you got it the next morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How was it packaged?
It was in a plastic. The money was in a plastic bag, like a Ziploc bag, that was inside a brown bag and then like a grocery bag over it.
And was the money stapled?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Can you explain how it was stapled? Like what size bills and what increments were stapled together?
I believe it was stapled in, I never counted it, but it was like in a stack and it was stapled in the corner.
All right, were they $100 bills or something else?
They were $100 bills and there was some 20s and 50s.
Okay. And was the money damp?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Explain what you mean to the jury.
A couple days after that, I went and I opened the bag and I called Sigfredo and I told him, I was like, there's mold on this money. And he's like, well, blow dry it. And I was like, but why would there be mold on the money? And he's just, I don't know, just blow dry it. So I believe his parents or his mom might have washed the money.
You mean like physically wash the money?
Yes, ma'am.
And why do you think his mom did it?
Because he was always adamant about telling me he didn't have any money in his house. And he told me that his parents had just stopped by right before I got there. So all of a sudden he had money to put in the trunk of my car the following morning. Was the money,
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
I'm sorry.
Was the money already sorted out and packaged when you first saw it, or was he doing that?
No, it was already stacked and sorted out.
Okay. And did he have to, so he didn't have to go anywhere to get the money, he already had it when you arrived?
Yes, ma'am.
Was there any argument that night about the money or the next morning?
With me and Charlie?
Yes.
No.
Did you, I guess you did stay there that night? You may have already said that.
Yes, I fell asleep.
Was there any argument with the defendant at all about anything that night?
No, ma'am. Not that I can recall.
Did you threaten him in any way?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Judge, may we go sidebar?
All right.